The TSA checkpoint at Denver International Airport was about to become the stage for the most humiliating mistake in aviation security history. Agent Rodriguez had been harassing the stunning blonde woman in line for 20 minutes, making crude jokes about her appearance and questioning why someone so pretty needed to travel alone. But what he didn't know was that the gorgeous passenger he was humiliating wasn't just any traveler, she was Brigadier General Victoria Sterling, and her delayed flight was about to trigger a security response that would shut down the entire airport. Welcome to Silent Hero Stories. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where in the world are you watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button. The morning rush at Denver International was in full swing, with thousands of passengers flowing through security checkpoints like a river of humanity heading to destinations around the world. Among them, apparently unremarkable in her civilian clothes, was a woman who drew stares wherever she went. Victoria Sterling stood in the security line with the patience of someone accustomed to military precision, her platinum blonde hair catching the fluorescent lighting, her blue eyes calm despite the chaos around her. At 34, General Sterling commanded the respect of tens of thousands of Air Force personnel, but in civilian clothes at an airport security checkpoint, she was just another beautiful woman that TSA Agent Rodriguez thought he could intimidate. Rodriguez was notorious among airport staff for his crude behavior toward attractive female passengers, using his authority to make inappropriate comments and unnecessary searches that bordered on harassment. Next, Rodriguez called out with the swagger of someone who believed his badge made him untouchable. Victoria stepped forward, her movements carrying the unconscious bearing of someone used to command, though in her designer jeans and sweater, she looked more like a model heading to a photo shoot than one of the highest-ranking women in the United States Air Force. ID and boarding pass, Rodriguez demanded, his eyes already conducting the kind of visual inspection that made most women uncomfortable. Victoria handed over her documents without comment, her expression neutral, professional. What Rodriguez saw was a Colorado driver's license for Victoria Sterling and a first-class boarding pass to Washington, D.C. What he didn't see, because it was secured in a sealed document case in her carry-on bag, was identification that would have made him stand at attention and salute, military ID designating her as Brigadier General Victoria Sterling, United States Air Force, with security clearances that exceeded those of most generals and access to classified programs that could alter the balance of global military power. Business or pleasure, sweetheart? Rodriguez asked with a smirk that made Victoria's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. The term sweetheart was one that no one had dared use in addressing her for over a decade, not since she'd earned her first star and commanded her first air wing. Business, Victoria replied quietly, her voice carrying just enough authority to suggest that Rodriguez might want to reconsider his approach. But men like Rodriguez rarely recognized authority when it came wrapped in beauty and civilian clothes. What kind of business does a pretty little thing like you have in D.C.? He continued, holding her ID longer than necessary while his partner, Agent Thompson, processed other passengers with professional efficiency. Thompson had noticed Rodriguez's behavior and was growing increasingly uncomfortable with his colleague's obvious harassment. Victoria's blue eyes flashed with something that should have warned Rodriguez he was walking into dangerous territory, but he was too focused on what he saw as an opportunity to exercise power over someone he assumed was defenseless. Government consulting, Victoria answered, the truth delivered in a way that revealed nothing while technically accurate. As a brigadier general, she was indeed consulting with government officials. Specifically, she was heading to the Pentagon for a classified briefing on advanced stealth aircraft programs that represented billions of dollars in military investment. Government consulting, Rodriguez repeated mockingly. Sure you are, honey. Let me guess, you're some kind of secretary or assistant, right? Maybe you bring coffee to the important people? The insult hung in the air like smoke from a crashed aircraft. Victoria's expression didn't change, but anyone with military experience would have recognized the subtle shift in her posture, the way her spine straightened just slightly, the barely perceptible adjustment in her stance that indicated a warrior preparing for combat. Something like that, she said evenly, but her voice carried undertones that Rodriguez was too arrogant to detect. Step over here for additional screening, Rodriguez announced loudly enough for other passengers to hear, gesturing toward a separate area where he could continue his harassment away from the main line. Random selection, he added with a grin that made his real motives obvious to everyone watching. Victoria complied without protest, but as she walked toward the screening area, she made a decision that would change Rodriguez's life forever. With movements so subtle that security cameras would barely detect them, she activated a small device hidden in her watch, a military communication beacon that would alert Air Force security forces that a general officer was in distress. The additional screening area was a small space off to the side of the main checkpoint, designed for more thorough searches of passengers who triggered security concerns. Rodriguez followed Victoria into the area with the confidence of a predator who had cornered his prey, unaware that he was actually walking into a trap set by someone whose authority exceeded that of most politicians. "Arms out to the side," Rodriguez commanded, preparing to conduct what would clearly be an inappropriate and unnecessary search. "This might take a while, so I hope you're not in a hurry to get to your coffee-fetching job." Victoria raised her arms as instructed, but her blue eyes were now scanning the area with the tactical awareness of someone trained in combat operations. She was calculating distances, noting exits, cataloging potential weapons, and timing the response that she knew was already in motion. "You know," Rodriguez continued as he began his search, "a girl like you could probably find easier ways to make money than pretending to be important in Washington. With your looks, I bet you could." He never finished the sentence. Victoria's hand moved with the speed and precision of someone trained in close-quarters combat, intercepting his wrist in a grip that stopped his inappropriate touching immediately. "Agent Rodriguez," she said quietly, her voice now carrying the unmistakable authority of command, "I'm going to suggest that you step back and reconsider your approach." Rodriguez's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Hey! You can't touch a federal agent. That's assault on a federal officer." "Is it?" Victoria asked, her grip still maintaining perfect control of his wrist. "Agent Rodriguez, are you familiar with Title 18, Section 242 of the United States Code? That's the federal statute covering deprivation of rights under color of authority." Rodriguez stared at her in confusion. The beautiful woman he'd been harassing was suddenly speaking with legal precision and maintaining physical control that suggested military training. "Because," Victoria continued, "what you've been doing for the past 20 minutes constitutes sexual harassment under federal law, and your abuse of TSA authority to facilitate that harassment is a federal crime." "You don't know what you're talking about, lady," Rodriguez blustered, but he was no longer trying to continue his search. Victoria's demonstration of both legal knowledge and physical capability had shifted the power dynamic completely. "Agent Thompson," Victoria called to Rodriguez's partner, who had been watching the interaction with growing alarm. "I think you need to be aware that your colleague is about to create a significant problem for this airport." Thompson approached cautiously, recognizing that the situation had escalated beyond normal passenger screening. "Ma'am, is there a problem here?" "The problem," Victoria said, finally releasing Rodriguez's wrist, "is that Agent Rodriguez has been conducting what any reasonable person would recognize as sexual harassment under the guise of airport security." "That's ridiculous," Rodriguez protested. "I was doing my job. Random additional screening." Victoria smiled then, and it was the kind of smile that should have warned Rodriguez that he was about to discover exactly how wrong his assumptions had been. "Agent Rodriguez," she said, "would you like to know who you've been sexually harassing for the past 20 minutes? Before Rodriguez could answer, the sound of military vehicles pulling up outside the terminal echoed through the airport. Through the large windows, passengers could see Air Force Security Forces vehicles with flashing lights, military police in combat gear, and what appeared to be a substantial federal response team. Agent Thompson's radio crackled to life, "All TSA supervisors to Checkpoint Alpha immediately. Federal priority response in progress." Victoria reached into her carry-on bag and withdrew a leather folder that she handed to Thompson. "Agent Thompson, I think you should see this before your supervisors arrive." Thompson opened the folder and his face went pale as he read the identification inside. In his hands was military identification for Brigadier General Victoria Sterling, United States Air Force, along with security clearances and authorizations that made him realize he was looking at one of the most powerful military officers in the country. "Oh my God," Thompson whispered, "General, I am so sorry. I had no idea, you had no way of knowing," Victoria replied calmly. "But Agent Rodriguez has been sexually harassing a general officer for 20 minutes while she was traveling on official government business." Rodriguez's face had gone white as he began to understand the magnitude of his mistake. I didn't know. You're really a general?" "Brigadier General Victoria Sterling," she confirmed. "And you, Agent Rodriguez, have just committed federal crimes against a senior military officer while she was traveling on classified government business." The Air Force Security Forces team entered the terminal with the kind of precision that made it clear this was not a routine response. Led by a master sergeant whose ribbons indicated extensive combat experience, they moved through the airport with military efficiency toward the security checkpoint. "General Sterling," the master sergeant said as he approached, saluting with the respect due her rank. "We received your distress signal. Are you secure? I'm secure, Master Sergeant, Victoria replied, returning his salute. But we have a situation that requires immediate attention. By now, a crowd had gathered, and airport supervisors were hurrying toward the checkpoint as they realized that their facility was experiencing a federal incident involving senior military personnel. The airport manager, a nervous man named Davidson, arrived just as Victoria was explaining the situation to the Air Force security forces. General, I cannot apologize enough for this incident. Agent Rodriguez will be immediately suspended pending a full investigation. Mr. Davidson, Victoria said, I appreciate your response, but this has moved beyond internal airport discipline. Agent Rodriguez has committed federal crimes against a military officer engaged in classified government business. She turned to the Master Sergeant. Master Sergeant Williams, I need you to coordinate with FBI and military police. This incident requires federal investigation under both military and civilian law. Rodriguez was now shaking as he began to understand that his career wasn't just over, he was facing federal prosecution. General, please, I didn't know who you were. I was just doing my job. Agent Rodriguez, Victoria said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that ended discussions. Sexual harassment is never part of anyone's job. And when you harass a military officer traveling on classified business, it becomes a matter of national security. The FBI agents arrived within minutes, followed by Air Force Office of Special Investigations personnel whose presence indicated that this incident would be investigated at the highest levels. Rodriguez was taken into custody as airport operations ground to a halt around the security checkpoint. General Sterling, Agent Davidson pleaded, please understand that this doesn't represent the values of our airport or our security procedures. Mr. Davidson, Victoria replied, I understand that Agent Rodriguez's behavior was individual misconduct. But the fact that he felt comfortable conducting this harassment in full view of security cameras suggests systemic problems with your oversight. She was right, and Davidson knew it. The incident would trigger a complete review of TSA procedures at Denver International, mandatory retraining for all security personnel, and policy changes designed to prevent similar incidents. As the situation was being resolved, Victoria's phone buzzed with a secure message from the Pentagon. General Sterling, we've been monitoring the incident. Your briefing has been moved to secure video conference to accommodate your travel delay. The Secretary sends his regards. Victoria smiled at the message. Even delayed by incompetent airport security, the business of national defense continued. Agent Thompson approached her as federal agents finished processing the scene. General, I want to personally apologize for my partner's behavior. This is not how we're trained to treat passengers, and it's definitely not how we should treat senior military officers. Agent Thompson, Victoria said, you handled yourself professionally throughout this incident. I'll make sure that's noted in my report. The relief on Thompson's face was evident. While his partner faced federal prosecution, his own career could continue because he'd maintained professional standards. As Victoria finally headed toward her gate, now with a military escort that would ensure no further delays, she reflected on the morning's events. She had been traveling in civilian clothes to maintain operational security for her Pentagon meetings, but Agent Rodriguez's harassment had forced her to reveal her identity and triggered a federal incident that would have consequences far beyond one TSA agent's career. The other passengers in the terminal watched with a mixture of awe and satisfaction as the beautiful blonde woman they'd seen being harassed was escorted through the airport by Air Force personnel who treated her with obvious respect and deference. Excuse me, a young woman approached Victoria as she waited at her gate. Are you really a general? Victoria smiled, the warmth returning to her expression now that the crisis had passed. I am. That's amazing, the woman said. I'm starting officer training school next month. Air Force. What's your specialty going to be? Victoria asked, her interest genuine. Pilot training, ma'am. I want to fly fighters. Victoria's smile widened. Outstanding. The Air Force needs more women pilots. Study hard, train harder, and remember, no one can make you less than you are unless you let them. As her flight was finally called, Victoria gathered her belongings and headed toward the gate. Behind her, she could hear airport announcements about delays and disruptions, but she knew that some disruptions were necessary to maintain the standards that kept the military and the country strong. The incident would be investigated, prosecuted, and used as a training example for years to come. Agent Rodriguez would face federal charges and learn that authority without honor is just bullying in uniform. And hopefully, Future TSA agents would remember that they never knew who they might be dealing with, that the beautiful woman in civilian clothes could be someone whose authority and responsibility exceeded their understanding. Brigadier General Victoria Sterling boarded her plane, finally heading to Washington for meetings that would shape the future of American air power. The morning's delay had been unfortunate, but it had also been a reminder that respect and professionalism weren't optional, they were requirements, whether you were dealing with a private citizen or a general officer. What they didn't know about General Victoria Sterling could have filled a classified briefing, but what everyone learned that day was that beauty and authority could coexist, that assumptions about appearance could be dangerously wrong, and that some people carried the power to shut down entire airports when they were treated with less than the respect that every human being deserved. The beautiful blonde passenger they'd dismissed had reminded everyone that extraordinary people often hide in plain sight, and that treating others with dignity isn't just good manners, it's good sense.